bio as well. And yeah, what else was I supposed to say?
Your preferred pronouns, I
Oh yeah,
guess.
he, him.
All right. Thank
Him.
you, Chad. Let's keep going.
Deone bats an inteki mo malatalava. Kohogoya ko Atah Cocker. Hello, my name is Atah Cocker. I come from the Kiowa tribe of Oklahoma, from the Toybone Paddletea families of Redstone and Rainy Mountain. And on my father's side, I come from the villages of Kolomoto and Tefisi, in the Kingdom of Tonga in the South Pacific. My pronouns are she, her. I am an ecologist and climate scientist, and I am a medium height brown woman wearing a bone and glass and trade bead 2-strand necklace, a pink multicolored ribbon skirt, with medium length hair.
Thank you.
Mi'iha wenihinkam netwanya ne Jessa Calderon tongvet neha koi mixkanakan koi yo eme. Hello relatives, my name is Jessa Calderon. I am Tongve, also known as Tangva, as well as Shumash, as well as Yoeme. And we are currently standing on the lands of Tongva Nation. So this is part of my homelands. And then I am also the neighboring areas from the Ventura down to Central Coast is Shumash Nation. I am wearing a Dodger blue top with ruffles in the shoulders and jeans and some flats because I injured my foot and cannot wear heels right now. I stand about 5'9" as a brown woman with long brown hair that passes my waist, with waves of brown. So thank you for being here with us.
Beautiful. Thank you all so much for being here. Before I begin, I want to frame this conversation with this. Indigenous peoples make about 5% of the global population and protect 80% of the planet's biodiversity. This includes forests, deserts, grasslands, and marine environments in which they have lived on for centuries. I want to preface that this is a safe space for us to be as honest as we want to be. And for you, audience, I would love for you all to have an open mind. And this is the moment to start learning and educating yourselves on things that you might have not heard of, things that you might have. And we're excited to be here as well. Okay. So, my first question to all of you, and we can go down each and every one of you, is have you noticed or how have you noticed climate change affecting your community, your nation, your tribes, your affiliations, or your family members?
Well,
Mhm.
as you can see here, I have my basket weaving material. You'll see me basket weaving here up on stage. And basket material is very hard to come by in Los Angeles because buildings have taken over our homelands. Our water has been poisoned, and a lot of our basket weaving material likes to grow next to the water. So one thing you might notice is me putting materials in my mouth. And climate change has affected us to the point of our health, right? Because as long as our land is poisoned, as long as our waters are poisoned, when we're putting these materials in our mouth, we are now getting cancer because of the poisons that have been placed in our homelands. Also, the reason why it's so hard to come by materials is because there's no more land for us. Our land has been taken from us. Everything is privatized. And the amount of land that might be open, we're not allowed to touch, right? So we can't even heal our homelands because of this quote unquote ownership, right? We can't even put our tule boats in the Los Angeles River, in the Paime Pachait is the traditional word for it, because of the amount of filth in that water. And it's interesting because there are people now kayaking in that water, but I wouldn't recommend it,
Ooh.
right? And nobody should be kayaking in that water until we can put our traditional boats in that water. So there's so many things that affect us in our own homelands, but that is what I will stick with for now because as a basket weaver, I'm affected in those ways. My health is at risk, and the ability to continue to weave is at risk because we don't have places to gather that are safe.
Thank you, Jessa, for that. Anyone else would like to come in?
Well, I mean, obviously, what's happening in the beaches here locally, right? Even in Venice Beach and the marina. But I'll speak for the Latinos. What's happening in South America and the Amazon rainforests. What's happening in the forest of Lancondon by Chiapas, Mexico. We're seeing, an unfortunate deforestation. It We saw a great improvement back in the 80s where people were aware of what was happening and then suddenly it's back. We're seeing, I mean, a lot of it has to do due to the economy. I understand that local economy is important, the survival of that structure, but people are losing their land. People are losing their forests. Yes, people need to farm their soybeans. People need their meat farms, but the thing is, like, we're not having these conversations anymore, and it's affecting the indigenous peoples local to those rainforests. And how it's affecting the climate, I mean, okay, fine, we're cutting down how many trees per hour, and it's releasing uh, all this carbon dioxide that's actually affecting, the climate.
All of us.
And so anyway, but it's just there's a lot more happening in Latino America, and then we're going to talk about like the natural resources in Mexico and how now this country is fighting for those natural resources, etc.
100%.
But it's a bigger problem, and we could dissect this for hours.
No, but I appreciate you bringing that up because I think there's this misconception that, again, that a lot of indigenous communities aren't doing enough for our planet, and yet, as I stated before, with the limited resources that we do have, we do a lot more than anyone else. I'd forward it to both of you if you want to make a comment.
Yeah, so I'm a Southern Plains woman. As Guayma, we are currently located in the state of Oklahoma, and once we moved to reservation, we're in the southwest corner of Oklahoma. It's known as the Kiowa Comanche Apache Reservation. One issue that we have been having, and this is not a new or novel issue, we actually had some earlier conversations today about some of the problems that we're seeing, and we are having, like a lot of the center of Turtle Island, a lot of large storm events. Things are getting hotter, the ground is getting drier. Drought is a self-perpetuating phenomena within our environment. So basically, once it starts without meaningful intervention, it can just self-perpetuate, which has happened here in California. So my name is Eta, and my great-grandmother was the last Kiowa woman to ride on a war party. And she rode against the U.S. battalion to protect these lands and spaces. And the removal of bison from our area, they are ecosystem engineers. And the conversion of plains grasses to ag land has really changed our hydrological cycle. That's changed our regional biome, and like with the initial removal, it caused a dust bowl because you have all of these more than 3 feet of topsoil loosed in hundreds of miles. So I find it interesting to talk about these things here and now when these things have been going on for at least the last 150, 200 years in our area. And I think what I really like to kind of focus on in these conversations is, yes, these things are happening. Yes, it is incredibly urgent. But we can't keep having these conversations and looking around like we don't know what to do. And I use that "we" so liberally because actually one thing that I saw in the pamphlet was saying this thing about we're all climate hypocrites. And I think that is an interesting thought, but as an Indigenous woman, I think the term "we" is also sometimes used a little too generously, because I don't know that we, like as Guayma, as Kiowa, did do these things intentionally and with both hands and created all these systems to hold that up. So what I would really have loved about sitting here and starting this solstice with you all, so happy solstice, is I would like to hear and see more spaces outside of here so that we don't keep having this conversation, so that my 4 generations down granddaughter, who might carry my name, does not have to sit here addressing these same problems in a much worse physical place than we are now.
Thank you for that, Aita.
I know we have so many other questions to get to, but you just triggered me. So I'm going to speak to the audience about what we had here traditionally in these lands where we're currently sitting is fire. And fire is so important to our nation. And when the invasions came, what they took away from us besides our culture is our fire. Fire became so bad. And what's crazy is there's actual writings of the Spaniards when they first came to our homelands. And they didn't actually step foot here because in the writings, it says that there was smoke. So they called it the Bay of Smoke, right? And what that smoke was us burning to keep the land healthy and clean and the regrowth to happen. Like my basket materials, for instance, they need fire for them to grow healthy and prosperous, right? And so we were called nomadic people, but what we were really doing was going to our different villages to live there for 10, 15 years at a time while we could. And then what we burned, we come back home and it's ready for us. So when the Spaniards finally came back here, they said, wow, it's like a beautiful manicured paradise. But what they took away from us was the fact that it was a beautiful manicured paradise because of us. And then they proceeded to take away how we kept this place healthy and pristine. And when we talk about fire today, everybody's scared. And that's not the indigenous fault, that's the invader's fault.
100%. And I'm going to touch on that right now that you bring it up. This is why we're here. We're here to reframe the way we think about climate solutions. We need to indigenize a lot of these climate solutions because guess what? We've been on this land. We know what's up. You know what I'm saying? And if we were to just work together, then things can maybe find a better solution. But when I say work together, please keep in mind, we need to be respectful what we ask for, how we ask for it, and more importantly, we got to pay. We got to hire, and we have to be mindful of what we're asking. We'll touch base on that in a bit, but I want to go back to Chad because I know you haven't talked. Would you like to answer how climate change has affected your community?
Yeah. So my tribe is so I'm a Hausa, and that's just the band of my tribe, one of the bands of my tribe, and the tribe is called Nuchanath. And Nuchanath, in our language, it means along the mountains and the sea. So my people are originally we're coastal people, we're ocean people, and our people were all along the mountains and the sea. And the way that I feel like the way that climate change has affected our area is it's like I said, we're oceanic people, you know, and our people, I mean, I don't want to like speak like pan-indigenously, but indigenous people rely on the land, and our people rely on those mountains. We rely on sea life to survive. And like one thing that I appreciate is you know the basket weaving that's happening here. My people heavily relied on forestry to not I don't want to say to survive, but that was a way of life. So once our mountains are affected from hotter temperatures, from and the ice caps are melting, and our sea levels are rising. Like my people are literally like right on the ocean, and once those sea levels rise, our entire community is going to be impacted. And you know, I have an auntie that's like, she brags, and like it's, you know, it's a family thing, but like she brags about being in the house that's the highest in the village, because once disaster does strike, like she knows that she could keep our people safe. So like the way that our community is impacted, like it's affecting our entire way of life. And it's been that way for generations, and hopefully, you know, these like what Atal was saying, hopefully these conversations will be able to leave this room, and we're able to take everything that we're learning in these conversations and implement them in our way of life, in the way that we are living. Yeah.
Oh, no, thank you for that. I appreciate that.
I have to say, like, everybody's names of your people are so cool. As a Tlaxcalan, we're the tortilla people.
That's what it means in Nahuatl.
Yeah, so we're tortilla people. So, but I will say that climate change does change us because, like, we didn't have maize for a while, and Tashkala, we had no tortillas.
Yes,
Can you
girl.
imagine?
I can't.
Like I told my dad, like
can't.
no hay tortillas, and he's like, what do you mean?
Right.
Like,
Maize is a way of life.
yeah,
And
so it's
for some of you who may or may not know, right now, Mexico and the United States are in battle because the United States wants to continue putting GMOs and unnecessary things in our maize, and Mexico wants to keep it the way that we've been doing it for years, thousands. And it's we're not going to go off on that. All right, we're going to bring it back. I'm moderating. Jessa, for all of those of you who may not know, Jessa and her mother were in her land acknowledgement video. That was just me fangirling. Jessa, what are some initiatives that you are a part of right now, or if you would like to share?
So I work for Sacred Places Institute for Indigenous peoples who are located in Los Angeles, and the goal is always to protect the lands, the waters, and the peoples. And when we say peoples, we don't just mean the humankind, but we also mean the animal relatives, the relatives within the water, the plant peoples, the rock peoples. They're all equally as sacred. Not one is more sacred than the other. We all recognize ourselves as a part of nature. And so right now, one of the things that we're greatly focused on is a land rematriation cohort, which it consists of folks from the Ahashama Nation, the Tongva Nation, the Gabrielino Shoshone Nation, and the Chumash Nation. And what we're doing is we're going area to area to learn about the different ways of land backing and what that can mean and what that can look like, so that when we are getting our land back, which we are getting our land back, we can start healing it in different means and processes. But one of the things that we're going to need greatly when that continues to happen is the funding to do the healing, because as we've mentioned, we didn't do the damage, but now it's falling in our hands to do the healing. And with our hearts, we choose to do that. So it's on us to find the funding to start rematriating. And yes, I do say rematriating, not repatriating our ancestral homelands.
Thank you so much, Jessa. Absolutely. Eta, you're a scientist. Talk about the work that you do with your tribal lands. How do you combine science and ancestral knowledge to protect those and other indigenous lands?
Yeah, so we have a couple projects that are going forward simultaneously, kind of as we operate within the constraints of the land or property that we have now, and with the federal funds that we leverage to do these things, because we are in this economy and space. So one of them is that we've recently just started our bison herd back, so that's really exciting.
It's awesome.
Yeah, so that's been really lovely, and I'm excited to see where that goes. Another thing that my main project right now is working with some of our elders around traditional ecological knowledge around plants. So we were nomadic and had 7 principal bands who were really only together once a year for Sundance, but now we're all, I say also, our physical boundaries, though we live in many places, experiencing many things, but for Kiowa, our land base is fixed. And what we're seeing with climate change is that with seasonal changes in temperature and precipitation, now some of our flora and fauna are on the move away from the boundaries that we now are fixed in. So one of my favorite projects that I'm working on right now under Dr. Robin Walkimmer as my supervisor is looking at where these exist now and using kind of the Western science approach of creating species distribution models to look at where these things are, where they'll move, and how we can kind of mitigate and protect that within our space. But this is all, we have these fancy tech things that are going forward, but it's really facilitated by elder and youth talks and hearing how our elders do that to use these things to protect our, I say culture, but it is a life way. It's not something that's held in some silo or is exercised on a Wednesday at 3. It's just the way people live and have since time immemorial. So using those things, working hand in hand with Western science where they bend, and traditional ecological knowledge I find really useful in our area, and I've really loved seeing how excited both people and place are. I think one thing that we saw during the pandemic is as soon as larger society kind of chills out, how quickly the environment wants to respond, wants to recover, wants to be abundant. And that's something that our First Mother, in our way, that's how we regard the earth, that's something that she does. She gives abundantly and love. And even while we have this climate crisis going on with all these harmful practices on the land, treating it as a resource rather than as a kin and living in relation and reciprocity, I've really loved seeing that in these small ways and in place, when these things go together, both people and place respond really well, because it, as a scientist, they don't love hearing me say this in the academy, but it's love and care, and those things they can be tangible, and they, again, unpopular, but I say it all the time, it can be measured. And I think that using these Western metrics has been a hindrance in the past, but as we have more Indigenous scientists and more of our Indigenous peoples with multiple knowledges and worldviews move into these spaces, we're really able to shape the way that knowledge comes out so that it can be helpful to other communities, hopefully.
You're bringing up a great point, bringing in more Indigenous scientists. I want to change it back to Hollywood, because I know this is the Hollywood Climate Summit. Chad and Candido, you both work in media and storytelling in different ways. We're coming close to our end, but I need to touch base with you both about this. I think first, Candido, why, we know this, but can you tell us why it's important to have authentic Indigenous representation on screen, and how do you think it positively influences perceptions around Indigenous culture and leadership?
First of all, we're pretty badass. There's that to start. But authenticity is crucial when it comes to casting, which is what I do, because we in Hollywood have a very eclectic responsibility. What we put on the screen and the mainstream media, the world follows. It grants permission to the world what we're putting out there. So when we see storytelling like queer cinema, where we're talking about Indigenous peoples, all these stories grant the world permission, and look at all the pushback that we're getting from people, because they don't want to know the truth. They don't want to know that we exist.
Right.
So it's important to me, because a lot of our cultures are not educated even within our own communities. So for example, for us Latinos, there's this whole discrimination against Indigenous people. It's not uncommon for somebody who is Indigenous or is reclaiming their Indigenous roots like myself, and then be called el indio or la india. I mean, and we have to re-educate them. And even within our own cultures, talking about two-spirit people, it was really interesting to see the pushback even from Native communities to their own people. And so we have people out there that are doing amazing work, like Angelique Manthunder, who does Reservation Dogs, and God said, love you, Angelique. And so when I was handed a script that's about a two-spirit teenager for Disney, by the way, and what it's like, what that means, and that discovery, it's important to me to cast authentically, to not just find somebody who is Native, somebody that is two-spirit, that could tell that lived experience, so that not just the world, but even those communities understand and educate what that means. And the pushback that we get in Hollywood, I mean, we have huge organizations that, I'm not gonna I don't wanna say who it is, but it's like a huge organization that we all know who we're talking about, pushed back and said, because I was casting even the background, I was casting the powwow dancers, the singers, the drummers, and this organization didn't want me to hire them because the first 10 people need to be, union. And it's like, no, it's like, well, why can't you just hire a choreographer and learn the choreography, get dancers who look Native and teach them the choreography? And I said, I'll wear my dead body. Can you tell me that you have dancers that are actually Native American and are powwow dancers? I'll gladly hire them, but you don't have them. So that's my job to find them. And so they said, okay, well, we could do this for you. No. And we brought in people from all over the country who are elders. We brought in L. Frank, we brought in John Sneezy, Buffalo Barbie, Londa Lakes, and elders that spoke about what this means, and with a huge star like Wes Studi. And to know that this is what I'm doing,
Yeah.
it's important because I am showing the world that we exist.
Thank you, Candido. Yes. Our last question for you, Chad. Similarly, as a writer, tell us why it's important to include Indigenous voices in content creation just as much as it is important to get them on screen.
So very similar to what you were saying is authenticity. Shows like Reservation Dogs. I'm a writer on Reservation Dogs. That show wouldn't be the same if it went by the I guess the Hollywood standard of native filmmaking. If it went by the rules of what Hollywood tells us what to do, like what you were saying, like, oh, that's I think that there's a conversation that I had on set a while back, and it was like, before Reservation Dogs, we wouldn't have all of these really, really dope actors here because Hollywood tells us that we can't hire multiple natives. Like you said, like let's bring in other people that look native, and then bring in big star names and stuff like that. But when it comes to stuff like Reservation Dogs, it's authentic. It's people that live, that have these lived experiences that are on camera. But also, like in the world of writing, I think it's important to bring in the Indigenous voices in the world of writing because of that authenticity, and also the history and the knowledge that comes with that. I want to give like two examples. One example is one of my first films. It's about my traditional name, which is Uuta, and that means whale hunter. And I wrote that basically. It was my first film, and I was like, this is like my introduction of me, So I told this story about a whale hunter, and the idea of what it means to live in that lifestyle. And then I brought the script to my great grandfather to help me translate it. And in the discussion of translating this, like the story only got stronger because of the knowledge that he held, because of all of the history that he knows. And it turned out, I don't want to brag about my own film, but it turned out better than what I would have just made on my own, And another example on a larger scale is I recently had a conversation with one of the language consultants on Killers of the Flower Moon, and he brought up how many script changes there were the more Martin Scorsese came back to work with the community, because every conversation that he had within that community, the story only got more and more powerful. The story only got more and more deeper. So in order to create content that is extremely powerful, to create content that is extremely poetic and beautiful and funny, stuff that I mean, like good content, like it has to be genuine, it has to be authentic, and Indigenous people, what did Taika say? Indigenous people are the original storytellers.
Absolutely. He also said, stop asking us to talk about what the problem is, because we're too busy talking about it. We can't find the solution. So just hire us. You know what I mean? That concludes our time. Thank you all so very much for being here. Thank you. Whatever you take away from here, just know education is key. Pay us accordingly, hire us accordingly, and know what land you are standing on. Keep this in mind as we go up with our training, with our probable futures, and keep this in mind as we turn tables to the next event. So thank you so much, everyone.
I wish Conejo, thank you.
For tens of thousands of years, we have been stewarding the world's most vital ecosystems, living by a code of wisdom passed down from those who came before us. We believe that nature has rights, as people do. We treat all beings as kin. We only borrow from nature what can be replenished. We already know how. to fight fires with fire, to grow an oasis in a desert, to bring back species from the brink. Because for many of us, land is ancestor. Every tree has a story. Every drop of water carries a memory. And we are guardians of this shared home. So if you want to fight climate change, we know a way. Learn these ways. Lift our voices.